What you were just looking at was the Madrock Drone 2.0. It's a shoe I've been wearing for about the past year now, and before that I was wearing the Scarpa Drago. To give you an idea what they look like, they're pretty much completely worn down. They really can't be resoled anymore. They have a hole blown right through them, and so they're kind of past the point of no return now. I think it really goes to show how much longevity this shoe has though, which is really nice, especially coming from Scarpa Dragos, which is kind of annoying because even though they're kind of put on a pedestal for being super soft shoes, which they are, it kind of comes as a double-edged sword because they don't have great longevity and you're going to have to replace them a lot more often than other shoes. With the drone, however, they have a thicker sole, which means they last longer, and they're also more on the stiffer side. They're not super stiff still. I would rate them about on the medium end after they're fully broken in. If you're not familiar with climbing shoes at all, there's kind of a few different parts that make them pretty distinct and important from just regular shoes. For starters, these shoes have rubber all over them, which pretty much just makes it so you stick on the holes and you can smear super well. And another part of that is that it wraps around a lot of the shoe. With most good climbing shoes, there's kind of rubber just about everywhere, and the most important parts to keep aware of is the front or the toe, so the top and the bottom of the shoe here at the front, and then also the heel. Makes this shoe in particular super special. It has this molded cup, and you'll also notice that there's kind of this lip that wraps around, so you're able to heel hook on really bad holds that are super thin that you really wouldn't be able to normally. Because of this, I think it's pretty much the greatest heel hooking shoe that there is. I don't think there's anything better. And kind of the one caveat with having a lip like this is that you're not able to place super good smeary heels, but I still think it does a great job given that it has this huge lip kind of blocking a lot. Something else about climbing shoes is that they'll typically have a Velcro closing system, so this one has the same kind of deal, and it also has kind of these pulling tabs to just make the shoe go on easier, especially when they're not broken in yet. You're going to have to be using those a lot. I will also say the drone isn't something that's praised for being super smeary, but I think it's honestly really good at that also. Even though it's a stiffer shoe, it's not going to be able to conform to whatever hold you're on as well. I still think the rubber does such a great job of just kind of sticking to anything that you're really able to get away with smearing on a lot of things that you probably wouldn't be able to with other stiffer shoes. How I've got my most recent shoe though has been pretty funny because I've been just kind of lazy to get new shoes because I really dread the break-in period. I'm someone who doesn't downsize super heavy, I would think. I go down about a size and a half, so I wear a EU 42 or a men's 9, and I go down to a 7.5 or a EU 40. The drone being a stiffer pair of shoe though really makes it a rough break-in period, but the thing with that also is that once they are fully broken in, it really gives you a super personalized fit where it fits your foot profile super well. And I think that's kind of the last part of what makes the Madrock drone super great that's maybe not talked about as much. I'm not sure if it's just because of the way that it's made, whether intentional or not, although I'm sure it is pretty intentional. It just does a really great job of, once it's broken in, of conforming to your foot specifically super well, so you can have people who have different kind of foot profiles and it'll still fit them all equally pretty well. I kind of have a wider forefoot, and so the break-in period for like kind of this section of the shoe is pretty rough, but once it's broken in, it just makes for a great climbing shoe. Now to kind of see the drone in action a little bit more on the wall, I just filmed a little bit of my session. I didn't do anything super hard. I was trying out a couple 10s, but those weren't going super well, I'll be completely honest. I wasn't having a great session. The first thing up was this blue V2 V3 from a newer set on the island, and it just served as a nice kind of warm-up to get everything moving. I went up to 4.5s pretty quickly here just because I was trying some pretty soft ones, and the next one up for that was this purple V4 V5, which was right next to the blue one I just did. Something I'm kind of just realizing while filming this segment in my room right now is I probably should have done a better job of recording stuff that used like heel hooks around the gym, but there wasn't really too much to work with, I'll be honest, and since I was feeling kind of bad, I wasn't able to try anything super hard. And at my gym on the more moderate climbs, there's not so many that really force more technical movement. It tends to just be more powerful, but that's just kind of the way it is. So I'll spend the video just showing off more highlights and kind of stuff like that about the shoe. The last one up was this black V4 V5, which used these black pinchy holds that I really liked, but you kind of use them more as crimps on this boulder, but still turned out to be a good one. Now then, finally some heel hooking, showing off some of what the Madrock's really good at. On this blue V6 V7, which is the next one that I tried, it's probably a bit on the softer end, but there's a couple of heel hooks here, and it also really shows off how on the starting foot you really get a lot of control and a lot of power through your foot, so you're able to really stand on anything, no matter how bad a foot is, as long as you have an edge that you can stand on. I will say the moves on this boulder that require heel hooks aren't really Madrock exclusive, and that's just something that me and my friends like to say when there's usually probably a super tiny crimp that you have to just crank a heel on, and with the Madrock drone it just becomes exponentially better because you have that lip on your shoe. Getting into some more fun climbs here, this is a black V6 V7, which uses these super 3D kind of holds that have super big profiles. This is probably my favorite boulder from the most recent set which was put up here. It just has some nice flowy movement and also has a pretty interesting finishing sequence that you'll see here. You'll notice that I had to put up kind of a high foot here after I was in this Gaston pressed out position, and normally it'd probably be nicer to have a more smeary kind of shoe that's able to really conform to the hole that you're on, since this one's pretty 3D and bends a lot, but with the Madrock you're still able to get away with it just because the rubber's super good, I'd say. Obviously this video has been talking a lot about the shoe in particular, but something else that's pretty important is that no matter the kind of shoe that you have on, you should still be able to execute most things with just the technique that you have. And what I mean by that is that you shouldn't have to use a shoe as kind of a crutch or a band-aid for a bad technique, and instead you should just kind of use it to amplify what you already have. So for example, if you have pretty strong toes, which kind of sounds kind of weird, but me coming from Dragos, it's a really soft shoe like I mentioned, and so it forces you to build strength in your toes, and with that when you go to a stiffer shoe, you're just more prepared to go into any foothold and really press down hard on it no matter how bad it is. So for as much as I'm praising the Madrock drone, I think that is also something else to keep in mind that's super important. Then I have this blue V6 V7 up, which again doesn't really use any heel hooks at all, but I think it does a nice job of just showing off the shoe a little bit. Plus it's a good boulder and actually fairly hard for a 6'7", which is pretty unusual if you're looking at the past gym sets. You'll see me kind of fumble around on this end bit and then also kind of shake off and look at my hand as I'm coming off the wall because my finger is still a little bit injured and I probably pushed it a little bit too hard climbing on this so soon in the session still. Showing off a little bit more of the Madrock smearing potential that people don't usually point out is here on this pink V10, which is probably a bit soft for the grade, but even with that said, I wasn't doing super good on it. It's pretty crimpy on the left hand, and I was also just not able to find the body positioning super well for this crux move, which makes the boulder kind of a one mover, but regardless, it's still pretty fun. With your right foot, you're given this super slopey right foot, and with your left foot, you're given a slightly more kind of incut thing that you can press out on, but it's still pretty smeary. And you'll notice here as I'm using a jug intermediate for my left hand just to practice out trying the move as I was working on in my session, my feet are staying completely on and I'm feeling super stable with them. Now, the last thing I tried for this session was this black V8 V9, which I wasn't really planning on trying. It was just kind of at the end of my session, and I had been going around doing various things, so I thought I'd finish it off on here. Probably not the greatest idea in hindsight because it was super crimping at the end of my session, but I was making sure to take it pretty chill here. You'll notice here I was using my old pair of drones, and that was just because I didn't feel like breaking in my new one so much more right now at this session, but I was kind of forced to switch to my newer pair just because this boulder did use pretty bad feet, and it's a good example though to show off just kind of the huge difference it makes. Not just with the drone specifically for this example, because I mean I have a blown out parachute. Of course it's gonna feel pretty bad if I'm trying to toe down super hard on a bad foothold, but as I put on that new pair, I just felt completely confident going into this kind of sequence where you have to blast out into a Gaston and get a foot up so you can crank into this next higher crimp. This next sequence also required the use of some pretty bad footholds, and you were having to stand on them with a lot of weight just because the crimps weren't super good and you weren't putting too much weight on them. This wall is probably like 5 degrees overhung, so it's practically slab. So then, the session wasn't anything too exciting, and it was just kind of more to show off the drone and what I think of it and what I think makes it pretty much the greatest shoe that there is. I do have to say that you should take everything that I do say in this video with a grain of salt, just because everyone's foot's going to be a little bit different, everyone's going to have preferences, and everyone's going to have different styles. So with that, you should choose a shoe that goes along with those and aligns with most of what your priorities are and what you do for climbing. But even with that said, I think the Madrock is a great shoe that does a lot of things super well, and there's not so many things that it does poorly. Something that I do kind of want to note is that these pull straps kind of do tend to kind of get ripped. I noticed on my previous pair of Madrocks, they like to kind of rip along the seam here. I'm not sure if that's what it is, but just kind of rips down into this blue rubber part. It's not anything that's a massive deal, but I think it is just something to consider. Something else that I never really hear anyone bring up either is that this interior is kind of made of a suede feeling leather. I'm not really too sure, but it kind of feels fuzzy, and because of that, it tends to get a lot dirtier easier, I noticed, than some other shoes. You just kind of have to do a better job of cleaning them if you do that regularly, or at the least like I do. I use some anti-moisture kind of slip-ins to go into my shoe that sucks that all up. It's pretty much just charcoal, I think. I am curious to know if anyone else disagrees with what I've said in this video, and if you do, feel free to argue with me in the comments. And also with that, just feel free to comment down below what your favorite pair of shoes. Everyone has their opinions, and I'm sure everyone has what they think is the greatest shoe, so leave it down in the comments below. If you liked watching this video, feel free to give it a like, and also maybe subscribe if you want to keep seeing some more of my content. Thank you for watching if you made it all the way through to the end of this video, or if you just scrolled by and you're watching this now, thank you again still, and hopefully I'll see you in a video next week.